With water temperatures here in western Montana getting problematically high for cold water species like trout, I'm turning my attention to cool water species and warm water species like small and largemouth bass. Both species of bass love eating crayfish, and so that's what I'm tying. This is my Clark Fork crayfish. For a hook, I'm using a Gamakatsu size 2 60-degree bend jig hook. Take 2 zonker strips and pierce them with the hook point, orienting them perpendicular to your hook shank. While I've blocked the process with my hands here, you can see the end result. Now that you've got your zonker strips oriented, start your thread about a third of the way up the hook shank and take it back to where you have the rabbit strips impaled to the hook. Taking a few figure 8 wraps will help secure those rabbit strips. Once you've got those 2 zonker strips nice and anchored, reach for a bag of crystal flash. In this case, I'm using fluorescent orange. Snip a few short strands and tie them in, wrapping them around the bend of the hook so that they are coming back straight in between the 2 zonker strips, which will imitate the claws of our crayfish. Once you've got your crystal flash tied in, take a few pieces of rubber leg material and tie them in the same manner. This will help imitate the spiky antenna of the crayfish, so definitely want to try to orient them in between or at least parallel to your claws. Take your thread all the way up to the front of the hook, right where the jig starts to bend. In this case, I'm using a pair of silver dumbbell eyes, but I am a true believer that the sight of eyes can be a trigger for fish, but for the sake of being imitative of a crayfish who don't have eyes right on their butt, I'm using the plain silver. Secure those eyes with a few figure 8 wraps, and then you can use super glue, or in this case I'm using UV cure to cement them in. With only a little extra effort, you could probably use ice dub and some wire to do this step, but this crystal flash chenille from Hairline in Rusty Brown I think looks really nice on this fly. It gives it a nice full body, and it also provides a little bit of flash. Tie that in, and tie a pair of rubber legs in, orienting them toward the back of the hook, but if they're splayed out to the sides, that's totally fine. As you'll see, as we start to wrap our chenille, they will get in the right place. Take a few wraps with the chenille, tie it off again, and repeat this step with another set of rubber legs. You can do as many sets of rubber legs as you'd like. In this case, for simplicity's sake, I'm only going to do 2, I believe. But you could put legs all the way up this crayfish, and I certainly don't think it would fish any worse, and maybe a bit better. Once you've made it up to right behind the dumbbell, tie off your chenille and snip it off close. Now reach for your crystal flash again, taking 2 very long strands that are going to run the entire length of this fly. Tie them in. You can wrap them around the hook bend, as I've done here, to really help orient them right. And don't worry about trimming them. We can clean up the fly in a little bit. To imitate the tail of a fleeing crayfish, I'm going to use 2 feathers. I believe this is chickaboo. I'm really not sure. I found it in my drawer. And tie them in on the bottom side of the hook. As you can see, the feathers here are bending toward the front of the fly, so that when I pull this fly, that tail will bend just as a crayfish's tail will when it flees. Take a few whip finishes right in front of your dumbbell eyes, snip your tying thread off close, go back to your super glue or UV clear cure, finish off your fly. If you've been a little bit more meticulous than I was with my measuring and tying in of materials, this step might not be necessary, but for me in this case, definitely want to clean up these rubber legs and crystal flash and make sure everything is even and symmetrical so the fly looks good when it comes off the vise. And there you have it, the Clark Fork Crayfish. Not a particularly difficult fly to tie, and certainly effective. It's definitely a platform that I'm going to keep tweaking and playing around with. Give those trout a break when the water temps get high, and go put some hooks in some bass.